Anyway, thank God I practiced today, man. Or I wouldn't have had a chop. But, you know, I talk about this all the time. I'm very fickle when it comes to tenor players that I've listened to in the early years, like I was, 15 when I started playing, 14, 15 years old. And first record I heard was Coleman Hawkins. And I still remember that sound, that beautiful sound that he had. And of course the record was Body and Soul. You know, it's, I still like to do that. Once a night I pay homage to Coleman Hawkins. The next tenor player I heard was Stan Getz, and I wanted to play that way, and I couldn't understand. They were both playing the same mouthpiece and had two completely, same horn, same mouthpiece, two completely different sounds. And then I heard Gene Ammons. And to this day, I think Gene Ammons is still my favorite ballad player, but he could play fast. He could play as fast as Sonny Stitt, and I heard those two guys together when I was growing up. And one of the first songs that I learned was from Gene Ammons. It was like My Foolish Heart.
Folks, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show. We're here in North Hollywood, California with absolutely shaman musician and beautiful cat, Don Menza. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
My pleasure.
Let me ask you a question for the audience tuning in. I want you to talk a little bit about the Wade Leggy and the Black Unions, the jam session that used to go on in Buffalo when you were younger. Can you talk about how those guys accepted you? And actually, more to the point, what was it like having separate unions?
I wasn't even aware of it. I mean, we were allowed to go to any of the black clubs, and the black musicians all played, most of them that played in the jazz club in Buffalo, most of them, or in the white clubs, were black. But I didn't really ever experience that black-white controversy or segregation thing until 1955 when I joined the Army. But I remember going to the Black Musicians Club in Buffalo the first time, and I went up there to play, and there was the drummer from Buffalo, oh my goodness, I always forget his name.
Yeah, no, it'll come to you.
Anyway.
Frankie Dunlap.
Frankie Dunlap, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I remember going up there, and I played a song, and he says, and everybody's, yeah, Don, you know, it's okay, but you got to learn, if you want to come back here and play again, you got to learn it, learn it the right way, find the changes, play the right chord changes. And I said, well, where do I go to learn it, you know? And he said, well, there are records. Go out there and find. There were nobody was teaching jazz in 1952, 1951, 1952, when I started playing. And so I went out and I went to the local record shop and I said, I need a jazz record of I Can't Give You Anything But Love. And lo and behold, it was unanimous.
Joe.
And I went home and I learned that record by heart. I still know most of it, you know. But it took me about a month and I transcribed it and I went back. I only played 3 courses. I played 1 course of the melody, 2 courses of stretching out, but I did it note for note from the record. And they all came to me and said, yeah, man, that's it, you know. They were very encouraging and so whenever I wanted to play, go to a session, I went there.
It was Sunday afternoons?
Well, late Sunday afternoon. It usually started about 5 or 6, and I had to be out of there by 8:30 or 9, and my mom and dad would come and pick me up, and that was it. I wasn't old enough to be in there. And like I tell this story over and over again. My mother was very, very upset about the fact that I wanted to be a jazz saxophonist or a jazz musician, period. She said, well, I was like, 16, 17 years old. And she told me, one of my uncles was a doctor. My dad was an electrical engineer. And all my uncles were like professional men of sorts. None of them into music. I was the first musician in the family. And I remember them one afternoon, she said, Donald, come here. I said, oh, what did I do now?
Donald.
Yeah, so I sat down at the kitchen table, and 3 of my uncles came in and tried to talk me out of this saxophone thing. And I said, well, that's all I want to do. I want to play the saxophone. They talked to me for an hour, and finally they left. And I remember my uncle looking at my mother and saying, he's your problem. You got a problem there. And my mother looked at me. She said, listen, you don't want to do that. You're going to wind up in smoke-filled places where they smoke dope, and drugs, and loose women. And I said, really? When do I start?
Sounds about right to me. People are actually. Could you play a little bit? People just asking for Body and Soul. Can you play a little bit of Body and Soul?
Body and Soul.
Coleman.
The one that I remember the most was the more than the original 39 recording, the classic one on RCA Victor, is the Rainbow record from 1940-41. It's called Rainbow Mist, and Hawk says, and it's infectious. I can't do it too much because then it takes me a week or so to get out of it.
Really get that high off.
Oh yeah, it's addictive to play that way. I mean, even when he played. Yeah, he was wonderful, man.
Can you talk about the first time you played Birdland? Did you go to Birdland and play?
Birdland was 1959. I was on the Alboleto band. And this is an interesting story. It was my last night on it, and I'm an opera fan, and the great tenor from Sweden, Jussi Björling, was singing a recital in New York, his Carnegie Hall recital, which there's a record of, thank God. But I wanted to go see him, and Al wouldn't let me off a night early. Anyway, my feature on their band was Cherokee, and I was playing a King Super 20 then, and they're not the most stable horns,
right,
or strongest horns ever made. The posts used to come off. Anyway, I'm in the middle of the second or third chorus, and the one key, this key right here, fell off the horn. And I just stopped and I looked at it. I started laughing, and picked up the key, and I'm holding the key. And all of a sudden, I feel this hand on the back of my shoulder from behind. I turn around. It was Illinois Jacquette. and he's handing me his horn to play. How about that? For baptism under fire.
Going back to what your mom was trying to talk you out of, was that?
Yes.
Let me ask you though. I was not even close to being birthed, and I'm just wondering about that fact that you kind of. I mean, you played around with certain things, but was there a divide between the people that were using junk and people that were sober?
Well, I was very sober for a very, very long time. I dabbled with some smoke later, but that was about it, and a little bit of alcohol. I never considered myself an alcoholic. I don't think that it was. I was always afraid of it. I saw what it did to good friends, and I saw what it did to great musicians. It wasn't mind enhancing, or it had nothing to do with that. It's addictive. That's it. After a while, you need it not to play. But those guys used to practice that way. So when they went out to play, they made sure that they were high, and that's really a drag. And I don't want to get into like who it was but I was afraid of it very much, and I'm glad I had a great deal of respect and fear of it, mostly fear.
Fear, because you saw people becoming roadkill.
Oh yeah, they were. It's not good.
Was there a situation where people said you weren't trusted because you weren't on junk?
Well, there were people that really put down all those guys that did it, and I don't want to say most. No. I don't want to say most of the guys that I liked had dabbled with it or were hooked or were addicted, but it's almost that way. It was true, and it's not fair. I said, look past that. I don't care. I don't care about that. Listen to what he's playing, and junk didn't make him do that. Junk eventually made them get out of it. It's a long story. It's a long, and it's a never-ending story.
Right. I mean, it's a constant journey.
Sad.
This is really important. When was the first time that you really had to learn to play a song in every key? Jackie Byard used to have lessons at his apartment at Berkeley. Mark Levine would come over and play piano, and Jackie would play drums. And he'd say, let's play Cherokee in all 12 keys.
You know what? I didn't know about that. I knew Jackie from the Maynard Ferguson days. We were on that band together.
You were in the band with Jackie?
Oh yeah. Jackie and I were like rather good friends. And oh man.
No, your wife just came in. It's all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, we were good friends. Jackie was, and he was always rather encouraging. He made a big influence on me as far as my writing was concerned. Probably my favorite charts on that band were Jackie Byard's.
What were they like?
One was Extreme. What were they like?
Well, I mean, what got you off about them?
It was different. It was different and so exciting harmonically and rhythmically. I mean, it was a lot of energy, and that's what I was about. And that's what I mean, it wasn't the most serene kind of charts. There was a chart that he wrote called Extreme. There was another one, Lucky Day. Oh man, it was Jackie was wonderful. And again, he was like sort of, I want to say, Thelonious Monkish in his playing and even in his writing, but it was great.
That's an interesting allusion to analogy to Thelonious. But so I mean,
it was. He was. He played that way, and it was really great, man. I loved him, man. I loved his playing and his writing. Yeah.
So you didn't have like where Mark Levine would fall apart, in the key of D playing Cherokee or something like that, and then Jackie would say, "Okay, now you know what you need to do. Come back next week." Where did your ears get unlocked on the bandstand the most? Was it with Maynard?
No, it was the times when I showed up someplace and somebody wanted to play a tune that I thought I knew, but they were doing it in another key, and I still do that. I go upstairs and I learn tunes in 3 different keys and or 4 different keys. I don't care, but most of the times that I go out to play now, it's just me, and I force myself to learn songs in different keys, And I had an advantage because I'm originally an alto player. I wasn't a tenor player. So I had to learn all the songs that I thought I knew on alto on tenor. And so in the same concert pitch, I had to learn them in the other key. So now I knew them in 4 keys because alto, if I played alto, I knew it on the tenor key on alto. And if I played tenor, I knew it on the alto key on tenor. And pretty soon I saw the relationship with all of that and started to do it. And that was it.
Was there can you talk about an example of a time in a group setting, like early on when you thought you knew a tune and and it was in a different key and you had to...
Not really, but it was rather embarrassing, I have to say. No, I don't... well, you know the stories of Sonny Stitt, you know how he used to do that.
Talk about that. This is really important. Charlie Neville, rest in peace, talked about that a lot, but I want you to...
Sonny would always say... yeah, I see you got your horn, man. You want to sit in? Yeah, come on. What do you want to play? And then say, well, let's play I Got Rhythm. He'd say, okay, let's do I Got Rhythm in A, not B flat. And Sonny would play it like he was in his normal key. And he was, I mean, I remember Red Holloway telling me a story, and I was there that night. I witnessed it. They were playing at Chin's, or not Chin's, but a Chinese restaurant of name, down towards the airport here. And I went down because I knew Sonny was in town and I knew that Red was going to play with him. This was right after Gene Ammons died.
Wow.
And I went down there and Sonny said, now we're going to feature Red Holloway on alto saxophone playing a ballad of his choice. And he played April in Paris. And as he's finishing, and he sounded wonderful. As he's finishing, Sonny's came out with his alto and played it. Red, you could see Red was a little embarrassed, and I went backstage to talk to Red, and he's looking at Sonny. He said, Sonny, why'd you do that to me? And Sonny said, what do you mean? He said, man, you made me look bad. I thought we were friends. He says, we are. Off the bandstand. On the bandstand, I don't have any friends. Sonny Stitt.
Don Menza, live on the Jake Feinberg show, just having a ball. What do you think about the word jazz? I mean, you're a bebopper at heart. And you consider yourself a bebopper, but tell me about the word jazz. And you're like, what you ask someone what jazz is today, you get 15 different definitions of it. I'm just trying to figure out.
It's a beautiful way to express yourself, to play what you think. It has nothing to do with current trends or popular music,
right?
Or how do you look on stage? I remember the first time I saw Charlie Parker. I was shocked. He came in, the bottom of it was a beautiful supper club in Buffalo. With strings, he came on. His shoes were all muddy. The bottom of his pants were wet from the rain. Came out there, and luckily the man in the spotlight had enough sense, and he zeroed in on the horn and bird. And he sounded... But the next day I heard all kinds of criticism of him. Yeah, man, muddy shoes. And I said, close your eyes and listen.
It was still superficial, though. He was getting criticism, superficial criticism.
Oh, yeah, always. Too bad. But jazz...
So yeah, let's get back to that, because you said it's not about pop...
Well, I'm talking about classic jazz. I know people that say, yeah, but that's old-fashioned. Really? I'm old-fashioned, and I want to play that way.
What is old-fashioned? What are the values?
Well, the values of old-fashioned. It's like Coleman Hawkins, Don Byas, Sonny, even early Sonny Rollins, Gene Ammons, Sonny Stitt, all those beautiful players, all that Charlie Parker, that old-fashioned. Show me somebody that plays that good and that creative and that soulful now.
Yeah, that's what's missing is the soul.
That's what.
And I'm curious because we did our first interview back in 2011, and you talked about in academia the assembly lines. They're churning out, it's a factory,
and everybody sounds the same.
Right.
This is a story that Sonny Rollins told me about meeting James Moody and Benny Golson in the San Francisco airport. They were all going in different directions. Somebody was just coming back from Japan. Somebody was flying to, I don't know, Mexico City, and so the other guy was going to New York, and they sat down for a minute and talked to each other. And I don't know who asked the question, and don't ask me for sure who gave the answer, but what do you think of all the new players? He said, oh man, you know, they're well schooled and everything, beautiful sounds and everything. He says, the good news, they have a lot of technique. And one of the other guys said, the bad news is they got a lot of technique.
Well, I couldn't ask a better person, because when you talk about facility, we're talking to you have...
No, I don't. I'm not one of these guys. I don't have perfect pitch. I don't have total recall.
Right.
I worked very hard to learn everything I know. And I don't consider myself a technical wizard. There are a lot of things that I don't like to play. I mean, a lot of keys I don't like, but I keep working on it. You know, I'm 82 now. Where am I going?
Still kicking ass. No, but I think more to the... Okay, but you can play. You have a great vocabulary. And I think that the question is, when did you realize... When did you start bearing your soul the same way Bird did that night at the supper club? Was it in Germany in the war? Was it after you stopped?
No, it happened on Buddy Rich's band.
Talk about it.
It happened on Buddy's band. I remember the first night I played with Buddy. We were in the studio. I was just filling in for Jay Corey, who went in for God knows what. But Buddy came to me and he said, man, who? And I wasn't there to impress anybody. It wasn't my job. I was just going to play who I knew, or what I knew. And when I came back from Germany, my chops were in good shape. I was playing almost every night. Every day, every night. And I didn't practice there because we weren't allowed to in the apartment building. So I went out and played and practiced on the bandstand. And it was wild. The sound had increased. Songs that I knew, I saw the relationship between different keys and everything, and I learned how to listen more. It was, and when I got on Buddy's band that first afternoon at rehearsal here, I don't know what he called. He heard me playing one tune. He said, hey guys, pull up this other tune. And he called it faster than I'm used to. And I said, oh yeah, boom, and I started playing. And he came over to me and he said, hey man, who are you? I said, I know who you are, man. And he said, yeah, man, don't get smart with me, man. You know, I'm Buddy Rich. You know, I said, Buddy, I'm not one of the kids from Berkeley or whatever. I said, I've enjoyed your playing a long time. I saw you with Jazz of the Philharmonic when I was 15, 16 years old, and on and on. And I never had to prove anything to anybody. And he loved my playing. No matter what he called or what chart came in, he always pointed to me and I could play it. And I was a good ballad player. I had learned that, like I said, from the real balladeers, from Stan Getz, from Gene Ammons, and from Sonny Rollins and Coleman Hawkins. You know, I was never really a huge fan of. I never tried to get into the Coltrane trap, and I considered that a trap. But I loved his playing.
Well, just for me, for a non-musician, because I hear Sonny Rollins and Coltrane, and obviously different time. They're different. They evolved at different times, but. You felt more.
No, they evolved together.
They evolved together. I mean, but I'm saying their sound changed over time, and and I'm just trying to figure out. Could you
Train maintained the same sound for a long time. Sonny didn't.
How did Sonny change his sound?
Sonny changed his sound. The early Sonny record, he was a huge Lester Young, earliest Lester Young, and Coleman Hawkins fan, and then came the. Tender Madness album was the first album that he made where you could really hear Sonny. They used to call Sonny, in New York, they would call him Sonny No Sound. Give me a break, man. That sound is so beautiful. Listen to Tender Madness. My God. And then came the Saxophone Colossus record and all the ones after that, and it's crazy. It's so infectious, the thing, and his time was impeccable. Even the early years, he had that beautiful time that it seemed like no matter how fast he played, there was this much space between notes. I hear other guys play fast and the notes all run together. Sonny had this thing where there was space between them. He was incredible. But Stan Getz too. But Sonny's sound, and then came the bridge, and the sound changed completely. I mean, it's a whole other sound. He changed the setup that he played on the instrument. It was, and when I first heard it, I said, this ain't the Sonny I know. And at first I didn't like it, and then I did. And then Our Man in Havana, or Our Man in Jazz, where he played all the bossa nova things.
Yeah.
My God.
Well, there was one with Bob Cranshaw and Candido on it. It was a trio. It was ridiculous.
Oh, it's unbelievable. I knew Bob Cranshaw too from the New York days on Maynard's band, but Sonny was, and then after that, then came I had enough of that. Let's do the trio album. He went back to that, put a different mouthpiece on it and different horn, and there's a live album that he did or a radio broadcast or recorded in the studio with the trio in Sweden. I think it's '69. My God, it's the most incredible display of saxophone playing. It's virtuosic.
I just wanted you to talk a little bit about the drums in bebop and music. They were an accompanist instrument. I mean,
yes, they were.
I just want to ask the question here. It's like the drums eventually, Cobham, Mahavishnu, Weather Report. The rhythm sections got progressively louder and louder. And
they went their own way. They had nothing to do with adding
texture.
I mean, and swing was out.
Right, gone.
It was gone. That wasn't part of what Zavino and
Johnny McLaughlin,
and what they wanted to do. It was nothing.
Can you talk about the prime jobs of those amazing bebop drummers? Because to me, they were just...
It was time, but it was such an important time, because without that, bebop wouldn't have happened. Because all those bebop players played time. They had incredible time. God, man. All you got to... The proof is there. Just go back and listen to the records, The swing, it was swing. And when I say swing, I don't mean the Coleman Hawkins swing. That was a whole other thing. But those guys played good too. But that's a different kind. I mean, Louis Belson used to tell me, well, Duke always said, and this was Louis' exact quote, Duke always said, if you can't hear the horn player, you're playing too loud. Come on. I mean, listen to Art Blakey. Listen to that time, man, in that band.
Who did you get a chance to play with? Tiny Khan or anybody like that?
No, that's before me.
Is it before you though?
Yeah, it's just before me.
Who was
Tiny? Tiny died just as I was learning, as I got into the Stan Getz thing, because the record that really freaked me out about Stan Getz was the live at the what was the name of the?
I should know this too. I mean, you're killing me.
Shame on me, man.
You're killing me, man. Well, you're not talking.
It's the Jimmy Rainey albums with
yeah,
Haig and Teddy Kotick.
Absolutely. That's Tiny Khan on that. I think.
Tiny Khan on those, yeah. And then Tiny died, and Frank Isola joined the band, and Roy Haynes did some of the records, but Tiny Khan was incredible, and without all that time in those recordings, it wouldn't have happened. I mean, that was the drummer was. Well, you play time, Well, you got to keep time. I don't know how the guys played with Dexter. Dexter liked to lay back, way back. And how the drummers found enough courage to just keep forging ahead, I don't know. Man.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you about, because there's a difference between some people have great time, but then there's also feel.
Yeah,
the
it was a different feel. I mean, Gene Ammons played right on the beat. Sonny Stitt and Stan Getz, they liked to forge ahead. Dexter liked to play behind. I mean, it's wonderful. Man.
But to me, that's why you guys all have your own individual sound. I don't believe...
Not just sound, but a whole different feel.
Feel, man.
Yeah.
The feel is there because, number one, I don't think you guys got uptight about tempo shifts or changing of the tempo, if it sped up or slowed down a little bit.
Well,
I'm sure you could hang with it, though.
They did, but wherever it went, they didn't fight. They went with it.
That's right.
And now I just don't understand it. There are some wonderful young players. And there's a young player a couple young players I know from from Europe that are just Germany and Austria. They play wonderful. Benny goes over there all the time, and he plays with a young drummer there. In my jobs over there, the drummer puts together, and he's a great player, Austrian, young kid. He must be 34, 35 years old. But he's been playing that way for 10 years.
Just to be clear, you were an autodidact in the sense that you would put on records and listen, but you.
That's how I learned how to play.
What about like the bird mentality of? Did you listen to everything on the radio and try to play it?
Not on the radio, but on records.
Outside of bebop, though, I mean, like other types of music.
Well, there were some players that played, had a wonderful sound. Georgie Hall, great saxophone player from New York. And he played on the Artie Shaw band. He played with Buddy Rich. They had a small band together. Georgie Hall was a great saxophone player. Came out of that Coleman Hawkins kind of sound. And Chu Berry, he had that kind of thing. Charlie Ventura, man, they were wonderful, man. But people don't know them; they're gone.
They are gone, but to me, it speaks also like there was a conversation. I mean, when you were with Maynard on those relentless nights, you said it was rough on the road. You were how many days? Getz with Teagarden was out 364 days a year, basically.
Yeah.
The truant officer had to come back and get him.
Yeah, that's right.
Did Maynard? How often?
No. I was by Maynard. I joined Maynard's band the first time in '60 just to sub for Joe Farrell, who had an appendectomy, and I had just had one. I was recovering.
Really?
And I went on the band. I played with them in Buffalo for a long weekend, and then Maynard said, "Listen, we're going to Newport. I want you to come to Newport, and then we're going to play Birdland. I need you for about the next month." I said, "Okay." Okay, yeah, I couldn't wait, And then about less than a year later, Joe left the band, and I got a call from Don Ellis, who was on the band. And we were in the Army together, Don and I. And he said, "Yeah, come on down, try out for the band." And I get there, and Wayne Shorter was playing, had taken his place. And he didn't like it at all. He left real quick. He didn't like that band at all. He left real quick.
He didn't like Maynard's band.
No. Yeah. And they were looking for a tenor player. So I went there, and it was an afternoon rehearsal at Birdland. And I was sitting there with my horn ready to play, and this African-American dude comes over to me, and he said, and I didn't recognize him. He said, "You mind if I use your tenor?" And I said, "Yeah, no problem." So I took my mouthpiece. "No, leave the mouthpiece on. I don't have a mouthpiece with me." And I said, "Really?" I said, "Okay, here, man, And he went up and played, and one of the other guys came over and said, "Do you know what that was?" I said, "No." He said, "That was Hank Mobley."
Oh.
I said, "What?" Hank was in bad shape then, and anyway, but
the Jimmy Heath. I just was with Jimmy in Atlanta, and Bird would come to their house and have to borrow his horn because he'd pawn it off.
Oh yeah,
these guys were dripping with authenticity. I mean, me, I want. This is really important. Can you? You told me this off air, but you were on the first TV show you were on when you came to LA was the Glenn Campbell show. But a lot of cats wouldn't know. You said Glenn would come down and play.
He could play.
He could play jazz.
Yeah. He was an incredible player. Yeah. It really turned my head around. I said, "What? Listen to this," And we didn't have a lot of that. Didn't happen a lot, but if there was an especially long break, he'd come down with the guitar and play. Because he knew most of the guys in the band, and it was wild, man.
Yeah. Like if you, looking back on it, you talk about the snowy night. Well, first of all, when you came back, and you were very disappointed with the sound or just music in general.
Well, that was when I got out of the Army.
But and explain because the music had changed, the language had changed.
Well, yeah, and most of the guys in New York were, and the segregation thing had widened.
What do you mean by that?
It got even worse. I mean, you couldn't go to a black session; they wouldn't let you play, and they had their own little caucus. They didn't. I mean, it was, and there were guys.
Even if the cats wanted you.
Yeah, that's right. There were guys that I was in the Army with, It was a drummer, singer Sam Fletcher, and I remember he was going uptown, and there was a session, a little get together. I said, "Well, I'll come with you." He said, "No, Don, you can't." I said, "Why?" He said, "They're black Muslims. You can't do it." I said, "What?" Yeah, I was shocked. I was really shocked.
So that was and then you went back to Buffalo. You actually.
Well, I was in New York. I had just gotten out of the Army, and I hung for about 5 or 6 days in New York before I went home. And when I got home, it was happening there too, and people that I thought I knew real good, they looked the other way, and a lot of white musicians were getting angry and looking the other way and not hiring black guys. Black guys weren't hiring.
What year was this? Like 58?
This was exactly January 58.
January 58. So this is well before all our heroes were murdered. I mean, you're telling me. Well, I mean, just pardon my naivety, but what went down at that? Why was?
Who knows? Who knows? It was political. It was all the racial thing, and it got worse and worse and worse instead of getting better. I mean, I remember the 50s or the early 50s. Man, I was free to go anywhere, and there was a thing in the first. Speaking of Buffalo, in the Buffalo Musicians Union, the bylaws, and it was created somewhere around 1914, 1915. There was a musicians union, and it was only white. You man, if you were black, you couldn't be in it. And there's a bylaw in there that if it said, and it was written in German, and I could read a little bit of German.
Yeah.
I had somebody say, "Come and look at this. What does all this mean?" And I'm reading, and in German it said, if you got caught playing with a black musician, you would be fined $25 and not allowed to work for a week. I mean, this was 1917. Well, things got better. And then, of course, the black musicians had formed their own. But everybody was working, and then there came the laws where you had to hire a certain percentage of whites or black on your gig. And it got completely out when I got home later. 3 years later, I get home, and it was worse. I said, what am I doing here? And then I got completely upset with it. I sold my horn. I had an alto and a tenor, clarinet and a flute, and I sold them all. I tried getting a day job, I was going to drive a taxi. I was going to take
Pete LaRoe could wound up doing that.
Yeah, I was going to take an exam for civil service, exam for the city of Buffalo.
But then you drove to this.
And then this guy called me, and he said, listen, I got a steady gig. It's a commercial gig. You don't have to worry about jazz playing. I took it. And then Alboleto came through town. That was 59. I went on the road with him for about 6 months. And that was my first recorded solo with the Alboleto band.
What album is that on?
I'm not even sure. It's called the Alboleto Sextet. That's it.
So the big bands were still happening, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that driving through that raging snowstorm, were you playing? Had you already bought a horn at that point, or you had basically walked away from music when you saw Sonny that night?
No, I didn't have a horn.
Who was in that trio? Was it a trio with Sonny that night?
Frankie, Henry Grimes, and Sonny.
Frankie Dunlop, Henry Grimes, and Sonny Rollins.
And I told Sonny the story, and I said, as soon as we became fairly talkative friends, I said, Sonny, and now I remember why I wanted to play the saxophone.
What can you? Was it more the spirit? Was it more? What was it that night?
The expression that he had, the interpretation of songs that I thought I knew. He played Flower Drum, the theme from Flower Drum song, and I swear his eyes got slanted. You had to listen when Sonny played, man. It was just like, whoa, I kept leaning forward to the point where I was going to fall off the chair, He was quite the player. I just saw him last October. Was it October? No, we were there in July. We were on our way back from visiting my wife's family, and in Long Island and in Cooperstown. And before we got to Cooperstown, we made a side trip and went to Woodstock and saw Sonny.
Is he up in Woodstock? I didn't know he was up there.
Yeah.
Did who gave you? I mean, you obviously were a known quantity, but who gave you your first real break when you got out to California?
Like I said, I came to town. I started going to rehearsal bands, and the first rehearsal band I played on was Don Pystrip from the Bay Area. You know him?
I don't know that name. What kind of music was that? Is that
He wrote a lot of charts for Buddy. We called him the Waltz King. Everything was in 3/4.
I love.
But he called me one morning. He said, "Hey, what are you doing this afternoon?" I said, "Nothing." And we lived, like 5 minutes from here. Anyway.
This is before you bought this beautiful place.
Oh no, this was 3 or 4 years before that, maybe 5. I don't know. But this was 1968. This was February 1968, and maybe January. And he said, Buddy Rich is in town. He needs a tenor player for rehearsal. I said, okay. And that's how that came into. And then all of a sudden I was on the road with him. I was only going out for 2 weeks. I didn't see Rose for 3 months, 4 months. We went to England and a whole bunch of places. And on the way back...
Did you play the Fillmore West and places like that? I feel like he played those places. More like rock halls, you know. Were you incorporating Hendrix? I mean, I know that's not what you love, but I mean, Buddy was always stretching vocabulary in music, you know.
Well, then he was really still pretty much straight ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't. He hadn't started doing the delving into like Beatles music and this and that, whatever, Norwegian Wood and all that. No, he didn't do all that. But we did play. This was later on. We played. Fillmore West, was it? Up on...
Geary in San Francisco.
Yeah, up on the top of the hill there.
Yeah.
I don't know. We were there, and it was wild, man.
Who else was on that bill? Like Jefferson Airplane or like some...
No. It was just us. No, it wasn't Fillmore. What's the other? I can't remember that club.
You know, let me ask you this. Is it really interesting? Because... I found this album called Very Rare. It's a T-Bone Walker album with Jerry Mulligan's on it, Dizzy's on it, Zoot and Al are on it. Steve Swallow was playing with T-Bone in the ghettos of New Haven. And I'm thinking that when I drove over here, I said, did Menza play with... The blues was right alongside the jazz at that time. Did you play with any of those original blues masters?
Yeah, there was a guitar player. I don't think it was T-Bone. Who was it?
He came through Buffalo and...
No, it was out here. And one of the rock bass players wrote the charts. And we played, I didn't do no solos, it was all him. Memphis, what's his name?
Oh, wow.
One of those guys.
Yo, I was just, I wanted you to just talk a little bit about...
But wait, after Buddy...
Yeah.
I left Buddy year to year, day to day, 1 year, came back here, and I came back in January. By the 1st of March, middle of March, I did the Della Reese show, and that was Pete Myers who wrote the big band chart on Love for Sale, and he was a writer of sort, good writer, good big band writer, but that was my very first television show.
Can you just talk about the significance of Shelly Manne to music in general? I mean, Shelly...
Shelly came out of that New York time and played with the real masters, Ben Webster, Coleman Hawkins.
Really?
Yeah, he played with those guys back there in the day. And he was a New Yorker, or New Jersey, I don't know where he came from. But Shelly was beautiful. I knew him, I played with him with the Maynard Ferguson, the Henry Mancini time. And then Nick Ceroli was the drummer that played with my small group and the big band. And Nick died, and that's when I hired Shelly to come in and play with the big band. And he did. He said, Don, I can't turn the music. I said, don't look at the music. I'll tell you.
No, because Ciroli was the best, one of the greatest drummers of all time.
He could play anything. He was special, and we were good friends. But Shelly,
yeah.
Shelly, he's on that small group album that I did. Do you know that?
Which one is that?
Me, Sal Listico, Sam Noto, Shelly Manne, Andy Simpkins, and Frank Strazzeri. You don't have that?
Oh no, that was on Pat Britt's label, right?
No.
Catalyst? No, I got to go and dig for that. That's an amazing. I don't even know that one.
It's a double CD right now. I bought the you know who produced it was Herb Wong.
Oh, it's a Pacific Jazz. It was
no, it wasn't Pacific Jazz. It was
Palo Alto Jazz.
Palo Alto.
And who was on the album? Was Strazzeri, Noto?
Strazzeri, Shelly, and Andy Simpkins, Sal Listico, and Sam Noto, and me. And I only played baritone and alto on it because the charts were originally written for trombone, so I covered them on baritone. And it only came out as and sort of got buried. Nobody really knew what to do with it, and the critics said, well, it's a typical West Coast album, over-arranged, and it's anything but. There's these long solos on it, man, and it's wonderful, man. It's a real jazz album. And Shelly said, Don, thank you for asking me, man. He said, we made a real jazz album, and if they think we're West Coast, because everybody there was from the East Coast.
If you had any, advice is the wrong word, but in this day and age, musicians are saturated with so much material, and they'd have to really dig to find the quality stuff. What is your advice to cats for them to help find their own individual sound, tone, timbre?
That's up to them, but I would say play what you feel, be honest about it, and it's going to be okay.
What does honesty mean?
Stan said it beautifully. He said, play every note you mean, and mean every note you play.
Can you just finish with a little piece of music before we go? Your homage to your son, maybe.
That's another story. I can't do that. But
play whatever you want. Be honest. And it was.
Well, you know what?
Yeah.
It was the time in Buffalo where I took a lesson from Stan Getz. I'd like to know too, everybody. This is a cannonball tenor saxophone. My friends up in Salt Lake
Cannon
City.
sax.
Cannonball.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, that's the name of it. But thanks to Tevis and Cheryl.
You took a lesson with Stan?
I took a lesson from Stan. I was maybe 16 years old, and I went to him and asked if it would be possible. I heard him play in Buffalo, and he said, yeah, but not before 3 o'clock. I said, well, I don't get out of school till 3 o'clock.
Not before 3.
So I went there, and he said, well, play something for me. And I took my horn out and put the mouthpiece on, and he looked at me, and he said, well, play something for me. And I said, what am I going to play? Let me see. The reed's all right. And so I started, and at that time I wanted to be a Stan Getz player. You know, I mean, that was that beautiful sound, that crystalline kind of sound that he had. It was beautiful. And I remember saying what to play, you know. So I started playing. It was what I knew of his from the record of Indian Summer. It's too wet, too dry.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. I don't know if this is going to work. It's too dry. licks from the, and that was that. But he started laughing, and two of my friends were there with me, and they said, "Oh my God, he's laughing at Don." He said, "No, that's. I just want you to know, it's the first time, because I had all this red hair, wavy red hair. It's the first time I ever saw somebody look like Zoot Sims and sound like me." But Stan was, and the other beautiful.
Don Menza, happy Thanksgiving. Bless you, brother. And like Sonny told you, you keep playing.
Yeah, thank you, man.
It's the Jake Feinberg Show. See you later.